Welcome back, listeners. My name is Larry Kallevig, founder and CEO of the Haven Financial Group. And if you're just tuning in, you are listening to the Haven Financial Group radio show, where for several years now we discuss crucial retirement decisions, financial topics, the economy, and there's certain things that can really make the difference between surviving retirement and thriving through those golden years, which we truly hope are golden. But planning is important. And what is the old saying, Kim? A failure to plan is a plan to fail. None of us want to. However, a lack of planning can lead us very much in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. Well, we're talking about, having a stable financial plan for those retirement years. We've just talked a little bit about estate planning and how important that can be. And we're going to talk more about that in just a few minutes. But real estate can really play a big part in your retirement planning as well. Maybe some people, have saved all their life in their home with the intention of selling that home when they get to those retirement years, downsizing, or maybe even buying elsewhere. They want to get to warm weather. All kinds of different things. Some people, when they get to retirement, they decide that they're going to add to their real estate portfolio. This will be income for them. So let's just talk a little bit about real estate, Larry, and how important it can be for people in retirement. First off, give me a sense, if you will, what you're feeling about real estate and retirement might be. What do you advise your clients? I realize it can be very different for each individual.
It can. I mean, the fact is, you got to live somewhere. And when we build out a retirement plan, we don't consider your actual house because you got to live somewhere. We don't consider it your investable assets. It is an investment, and a lot of folks we sit down with are in a great spot. They don't have a mortgage, which is ideal for retirement if that is a possibility. But then downsizing, getting to that one-level living option. You mentioned vacation property. We want people to look at all considerations. And when we talk about vacation property, we want people to step back a little bit and say, okay, you're retired. Don't go buy something on a whim in another state when you don't even know if you're going to like it there. I just had a couple in last week from Lakeville, and their thoughts, they're retiring, and they're going to go kind of just rent a place for 2 months in Florida. Mm-hmm. And then they may go experiment the same thing in Arizona to see really what they like. And I think that's a great idea. Because too often I've heard people, well, we bought in Florida, but then a year later, wow, we really didn't like it. And now you're stuck with a property, which real estate can be a valuable thing. It can be a good investment. You mentioned rental properties. Mm-hmm. They can create some retirement income. That's great. But the question is, do you really want to become a property manager in those retirement years or hire a management company? I often see people with rental properties eventually get into retirement and then liquidate those properties if that's the right thing to do. Again, property can have appreciation, but it also can have depreciation depending upon the real estate market at the time that you're looking to sell. So timing always comes into play here. And then it's always comes back to the tax discussions. Again, we're very forward-thinking tax planning. What does that look like when it comes to the taxation of your own residence? If you live there for 3 out of 5 years, or you're purchasing a rental property, what are the tax ramifications for doing this or that? Because that can lead to your actual decisions, and we want to make sure we're making educated decisions.
Sure. Let's circle back to what do you suggest for people? This is kind of going back to our first segment, but they're putting together, those estate plans, and maybe they own a lot of property. Is it best to get rid of that property and be liquid before putting together those estate plans, or do you suggest that people put that in wills and hang on to those different properties?
No, that's a really good question. In fact, when you do an estate plan, nothing should delay. There's no reason for delay of putting an estate plan together. Mm-hmm. If you own property, if you have a trust, that's going to go in the trust name. It's called funding the trust. Currently our house and our properties are in Larry and Rochelle Kallevig's family trust. It's in the trust name. Now, if you have a will, that doesn't happen. If you have a transfer on death deed, then that's just going to sign over to beneficiaries your property. So again, we want to talk through what makes the most sense, but it should not delay. If you have a property in another state, all property should go in the trust name if you have a trust. If potentially, and these are conversations one would have with our estate planning attorneys, If you have rental properties, is an LLC appropriate? Should they go in the LLC and then the LLC be assigned to the trust? So all these are the details that would go into a detailed estate plan that isn't one glove fits all. If you don't own a bunch of real estate, then maybe a trust isn't necessary. Therefore, those assets wouldn't go in. Certain things like titles, deeds, and accounts, which are also the probatable assets, they get funded into the trust. So again, we want to have the conversation, what's appropriate, what makes the most sense. And if listeners come in and visit with any of the Lexi, Carrie, or Keith, they're not going to try to sell you anything. It's going to really be a discovery. What are your goals? What are your aspirations? What are you looking to accomplish now in the future? How do you accomplish? Here's what it looks like. Here's the cost that associated with doing those legal documents. And then you can interview as many attorneys, or you can retain them, and they'll do it for you. They do a great job. They really do. They're not stuffy attorneys. They're relatable, and they really thrive also, like we do, on the education piece. So if you're listening and you're wondering, I don't know if my stuff is outdated, I've never done anything, it starts with giving us a call, having a conversation. We set it up at Haven. They come into our office. There's no cost for an initial 30 to 45-minute consultation. And what you'll find is it's very helpful. It lays the groundwork. And at the end of the day, it's how you execute, because it takes implementation to finally get something done. And for some people, that's difficult because, well, let's just say the procrastination is easy for a lot of people. And the easiest thing to do is nothing. But that oftentimes isn't the right thing to do.
Sure, absolutely. And don't be fooled, folks. Larry says this all the time. Don't be fooled by the idea that I don't have a lot, so I don't need a plan. That's not true. Everyone has something, and it's better to plan for that than to just leave it on a whim that things will end up where you'd want them to be. Larry, let's talk a little bit about real estate, though, as it relates to planning for retirement. How do you guys at Haven Financial Group, how do you play the idea of investing in real estate as part of your retirement plan?
I'll answer that question a couple different ways. People might be familiar with real estate trust, or they're called REITs, real estate investment trusts. They're I call that an alternative investment, a stock market type investment alternative. And I say that, I'm not against them. They can be part of an efficient portfolio. However, I think back to 2008 and 2009 when the stock market, if everybody I'm sure remembers, your 401k became a 201k. And what I saw back then as an alternative investment, and it's also an illiquid investment. And back in that time frame, the real estate market crashed. Anybody that had that, if they were in it, could not get their money, because they ceased distributions. I remember visiting with folks that needed their money out of these investments, but they couldn't get it, even though it was their money. And it took 2 to 3 years before the real estate that it rebounded. So be careful. It becomes illiquid. It may not be appropriate for you, or it might be appropriate for you. Then in real estate in general for retirees, we encourage, oftentimes for liquidity purposes, a home equity line of credit. If nothing else, to have it in your back pocket. Doesn't mean you have to use it, but it can be a good form of liquidity if needed. Now, again, interest rates plays a part of that. The other part where I'm very hesitant, and is we get it asked once in a while, is, Larry, do you think reverse mortgages are a good idea? And what I will say to that is, as a last resort. And I say that because it was just recently, I had a wonderful lady in from Savage, and she had retired. She had a good amount in her IRA accounts, good liquidity. And then I asked her in our discovery meeting a variety of questions, obviously, like we do in our process. Do you have a mortgage? And she says, no, I have a reverse mortgage. And I asked her, well, you have adequate assets. I don't understand why you'd have a reverse mortgage when you have plenty of assets. She goes, well, my son just thought it was a good idea. Well, it was not a good idea. She didn't need to have a reverse mortgage. They can carry high fees. I call it a last resort. Does it fit into your plan? I don't know, but that's part of the conversation. So looking at all the options, talking through the pros and the cons, and there always is, and then the costs associated, then the question becomes, does it make sense? Why does it make sense? And how does it fit in your overall plan? That's where I would take that conversation.
Hmm. Well, we've talked here about real estate as it relates to, of course, preparing your real estate to be part of your future plan, if you will, a part of your estate plan. We're also talking about real estate as it relates to your retirement and the best way that it can benefit your retirement. If you have questions about maybe real estate and real estate you own, real estate you've considered investing in, real estate you'd like to get rid of, and you're just looking for some answers, the folks at Haven Financial Group would love to talk to you as it relates to retirement and, of course, some of that planning for the future. 612-504-8400 is the number. Again, that's 612-504-8400. Give them a call. Tell them you heard us here on the radio and you'd love to come in and sit down and chat with the experts there at Haven Financial Group. When we come back, we're going to talk about estate planning again, this time with Roth IRAs, and we'll talk about how it can relate to that. This is the Haven Financial Group radio show.